to form. If everyone could be invited inside and the doors could be shut. Thank you. So previously there was a speaker who wasn't here, and I'm just going to call him again. Brett Williams. Did he arrive? Then the next speaker I have is Barry Anstey. And while you're walking to the microphone, I've got this is in relation to the Berrimah Landscape Heritage Conservation Area. Thank you. Yes, there is no item number for that one. But I will do the item number, yes.
The item number is this one?
There is no item number on my sheet. It's a heritage conservation area, Berrimah Landscape Heritage Conservation Area. It's not an item number. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, panel members, for allowing me to speak. Barry Anstey is my name. I've got a degree in architecture in 1972 from the University of New South Wales with an honours in for my thesis on Mortimer William Lewis, the colonial architect, and his family. I've been involved over a number of years in the restoration of heritage properties, and in fact had an award from this council for restoration of Hopewood. I reviewed the community report and Mr. Starr's report. I agree with Mr. Starr's that the community report lacks many items that shouldn't be in there and referred, but that didn't particularly concern me. What did concern me was that the community recommendation was that the Berrimah Conservation Area be deferred, and the recommendation of Mr. Starr's is that it be included. Now, there's no information as to what that conservation area north and south of Berrimah represents. But in my research, in my degree and subsequent, and the family owns land in the Berrimah Conservation Area, it's come via research that from on the southern end, from the bridge, there's some quite significant issues. Number one, there's the Catholic Church, which is a Pugan church, and it's not just of local, state or national significance, but it is world significant. But following from that, there's a subdivision that was done in 1868, I think it was, that goes from there up to the roundabout. And that is a subdivision of land which replicates an architectural design in so much that there is town squares and there's mews developments to go around that and stuff, things like that. Now, that kind of subdivision in this country is absolutely unique in so much that the first integration of subdivision and architecture is Canberra with Waldorf Early Griffin. Here we've got a situation that occurred in 1868, and it just can't go on that it was to be deferred under the community. It's now recommended by Mr. Starr's, and we don't know what information actually is available as to the extent of it, but to turn around and make it as part of this procedure. I think it must be excluded, as the panel said, the original community panel said, so that there can be a full investigation of the things that I've just talked about, because this 1868 subdivision is significance to this country of that type of arrangement needs to be taken effect of in how it will be handled in the conservation area. Now, that's basically why I'm speaking today, that you not proceed with the conservation area being included in the report to go out on public exhibition, but that it be subject to further investigation, and particularly investigation into the 1868 subdivision and the significance of it. The other thing I would also like to see that would happen is that if this thing goes out to community consultation, that there be an opportunity for people to recommend particular properties or buildings or landscapes to be heritage listed. It seems to me that council's properties have, and state properties have not been looked at. In my opinion, the Upper and Lower Welby Dams, which are 1908 and 1930, and the Boxvale Tract, which is about in the 1880s with the tunnel out through there, these things should all be listed, and they're not. And there should be an opportunity for the community in viewing this thing to make recommendations of items that may have been fallen through the cracks in relation to where it is. And that would only be extending the community consultation to more than just the community experts that have put on what they've put on. Because I think it's important that council assets have appear to have been not looked at in detail as to what was available and should be listed. That's all I've got to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Anstey. I'll just check if there are any questions. Did you have any questions? Did you have any questions? Thank you very much. The next speaker is Lynn Gulifa. Just call outside. Oh, sorry, you were... Thank you. So just while Ms Gulifa's coming to the lectern, it's item 134, 7 Jasmine Street, Barrel. Thank you.
My home has been taken off the list.
If you could just speak up a little.
Sorry, my home has been... I'm unprepared. I didn't get a reply to say that I was allowed to speak today.
Please proceed. We're ready to hear you.
Okay. My home has been taken off the list, and it was also taken off the list 10 years ago. It was... there's only a very small part of my house that's original, and it's had 2 great extensions on it. But I'd like to speak about the impact that it's had on myself and my daughter. I've been wanting to sell my house since the heritage listed happened over 10 months ago, and I have been unable to do that because of the devaluation of my property. And I did have a heritage listed home in Strathfield 15 years ago. And when it was sold, I lost $300,000 in value at that time. So it's had an impact on me now because I'm wanting to sell my home. I want to sell it to someone who loves the house. I don't want to knock it down. I love my home, but because of domestic violence on my daughter, I've had to go back to Sydney to help her. It's caused me a lot of stress being under heritage listing because the money that I could lose may not get me back into a house in Sydney where my grandson is and my daughter is. And it's caused me a lot of grief.
Thank you. So you do understand that Mr Stas in the peer review has recommended that the listing not proceed? That's
Yes,
the
I do
recommendation?
understand that.
Yes.
But I just want council to know that it stopped my life and it's also stopped me having surgery.
Thank you. I'll just check if there are any questions. Did you have any questions? No. Thank you for coming along today. The next speaker is Richard Howell. It's item 28, 2 Alfreda Street, Barrel.
Thank you for the opportunity to respond to the Wingecarribee Shire Council Heritage Study 2021 to 2023. I'm here today to oppose the proposed heritage listing of our property, Williama, located at 2 Alfreda Street, Barrel. While preserving our community's heritage is commendable, the process applied has shortcomings, evident in the case of Williama. In the New South Wales Heritage Office publication, Assessing Heritage Significance, 2001, the foundation steps of assessing heritage significance are to investigate the history of the item. It's this fundamental activity which has been missed. Assessments of Williama in 2009 and then in September 2020 for the 2021 campaign show its evolution over the 11 intervening years. Specifically identified in the report, the fencing, garden, structural condition, facade, extensions and others have all been assessed differently between 2009 and 2020, yet are still claimed as of heritage significance. The 2020 assessment contains erroneous factual assessment regarding the house layout and the rear garage of a similar date, which had been removed during renovations and extensions of the house, penned by an architect in this room, approved by council some 10 years earlier. After renovations in 2010 and then subsequently, more than 70% of the dwelling is new or significantly changed. The garden is new, the boundary fences are new, the house is almost completely new. Even the facade, cited as important, has been structurally and aesthetically modified nearly 15 years earlier. According to Step 5 of the Assessing Heritage Significance Guidance, the extent of alterations is a material consideration for assessment of heritage significance. The one remaining feature of the original Williama, which had survived nearly 100 years untouched, was the neighbourhood's iconic water tower on the adjoining property, which council permitted to be demolished earlier this year despite requests for emergency intervention from concerned neighbours. Aside from the fundamental misunderstandings of the history of the item, there is a broader issue with council's heritage listing plans. It's well documented that council struggles to process development applications. In the minutes of the council meeting on 15 November 2023, it was confirmed that the timeline for processing DAs at 125 days far exceeded targets. The council's annual report of 2022-2023 noted $4.6 million in additional non-budgeted expenditure, being nearly 3% of council's overall expenditure, to reduce processing time from 177 days to 125 days, still 40% higher than target. Managing 400 plus more heritage listed properties will only exacerbate this issue. The current DA backlog indicates a system under strain. Introducing more properties to the heritage register will add to the strain, causing delays and further inefficiencies. All property owners will face longer wait times for approvals, leading to frustration and neglect of properties requiring timely maintenance. In this time of financial hardship, consider the financial and emotional burden on property owners, which we've already heard today. Heritage listing imposes strict regulations that limit the owner's ability to make necessary modifications or improvements. This can lead to increased costs, potential legal disputes, adding stress to homeowners striving to maintain their properties responsibly. Furthermore, heritage listing can negatively impact property marketability, deterring potential buyers and decreasing property value. Effective governance and prompt service delivery are crucial community expectations and stated objectives of the Wingecarribee Shire Council through the Delivering Better Services framework. Exacerbating council processing delays with an extraordinary increase in heritage listings, some erroneous, is unconscionable. In conclusion, while preserving our heritage as a noble goal must be balanced with practicality and fairness, the case of Williama highlights the need for a more discerning approach to heritage listing, genuinely protecting historical integrity without imposing undue burdens on property owners or the council's budget and administrative capacity. I urge the council to reconsider the proposed heritage listing of Williama instead of focusing on an expansive listing approach to prioritise the conservation of truly significant, historically accurate structures. Via email, I've tabled our response to the original heritage notification with photographic evidence of the discrepancies between the two heritage reports and the errors in fact of those reports for your further consideration.
Thank you. We have that documentation. Are there any questions? Did anyone have any? Thank you for coming along today. Thank you. The next speaker is Stephen Partington. And this is in relation to item 166, 120 Merrygang Street, Barrel.
Panel Chair, panel members, to introduce myself, I'm Stephen Partington. I'm the husband, obviously, of the owner of Jennifer Partington, who is the owner of the property. Thank you for the opportunity to address this meeting today. I wish to speak in relation to the heritage study, and specifically, as you have indicated, item 166 of the peer review report, which refers to the property described as Goldsborough Law, 120 Merrygang Street, Bowral. This property was acquired by my wife in 2013. I wish to address the meeting in relation to two matters arising from such report associated with our property. The first relates to the proposed classification of our home as a local heritage item. The Heritage Study 21-23, issued in August 23, recommended that our property be listed as a heritage item on the basis that the house has significance as an early Victorian residence, which illustrates the development of Merrygang Street. The report went on to indicate that our home is of significance in demonstrating the principal characteristics of a class of the local area's heritage, in this case, a single-storey, weatherboard, symmetrically fronted, late Victorian era residence. The peer review report notes that a submission was received from my wife. The report notes the submission raised an objection on the basis of future planning controls only. The report failed to note that a significant portion of our submission, which was in the order of 2.5 pages, also noted that our home did not meet the heritage assessment criteria on the basis of significant building work that has been undertaken since 1997. We hold copies of council approved plans that at that time for the construction of a second storey at the property, comprising a main bedroom, ensuite, staircase and parents' retreat, together with work to extend the rear of the house to encompass a new kitchen, second bathroom and family room. The total area of the second storey is 66.7 square metres. The total footprint of the home is 170 square metres, and the total footprint of the rear ground floor works is 56.9 square metres. Accordingly, the total area of the new and renovated works, by our calculations, is therefore 72% of the footprint of the original home. I submit that the extent of such works indicates that this represented a substantial alteration to the original late Victoria era house. The change is also reflected in the statement of heritage significance in the heritage study, which indicates our home is a single-storey property and accordingly fails to acknowledge the significant work that has been done since the turn of the century. Such works, I submit, no longer allow our home to be classified as of historical significance, given the extent of the recent works which have changed the size and shape of our home, and therefore our home no longer demonstrates the characteristics of a Victorian era residence. The second issue I wish to raise today relates to the description of our home in the latest set of papers in respect of the study, where it speaks of our home as Goldsborough Law, 120 Merrygang Street, Bowral. The description of this property as Goldsborough Law is erroneous. The property has never been represented to have any name, to our knowledge, least of all Goldsborough Law. The sign on the front gate, which gate was only erected in 2014, referring to Goldsborough Law, relates to a legal practice that I have conducted at home on a part-time basis in my retirement, using an office located in the garage at the rear of our home. This name derives from the fact that the name was originally registered as a business name in 2012 and referred to the location of the office for such practice in the Goldsborough building in Piermont. I submit that the reference to the Goldsborough law is not heritage significant for the purposes of the current study, given the background to such name, nor is it a characteristic of our home. The name should therefore be removed from Council's records when referring to our home. That concludes my submission, Chair and panel members, today. Thank you for your time in allowing me to present our further case in relation to why we consider it is not appropriate to classify our home as a local heritage item.
Thank you. I just had a question. Did you say you or your wife purchased the property in 2013 and this work was carried out after that date?
No, the work was carried out from 1997 onwards.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
The council application is referenced as 97/0825. There was also further work which was subject to the DA, I believe, in 2011.
Thank you.
Okay.
So the DA you're referring to, that included the first floor and the extensions at the back, or was that a
No.
yet to be?
No, it covered the whole lot. So all that work has been completed. Timing of it was sort of in that sort of late 90s, early 2000s. Okay.
Today. The next speaker I have is Avi Baines. I might just move on to the next one then. I've got Tim Doyle. And this is in relation to item 432, 174 to 178 Oxley Drive, Mittagong. Thank you.
Thanks for your time today. In my naivety, I brought this along, but I only bought 5 copies, I'm sorry. So it was actually a letter that I sent to council, but not in relation to heritage. In speaking today, my agenda isn't to, I understand the significance of my home, and I understand that there's a certain amount of history that needs to be maintained, and I'm not opposed to that. What my agenda is today is to try and create a relationship with council so that we're on the same page in relation to what each other's obligations are in relation to becoming a heritage listing home. To start with, I just thought I'd go through the background of what the actual subdivision was and how my property came to be. So if you open up page 1, this particular page here, it shows what the actual subdivision was in the early 20s. You can see noted on there, there's some small cross in relation to lots 62, 63, 64, 71 and 72. They were my original property. And you'll note beside, at the bottom of that lot 62 and 72, there's a laneway that exists there. And that laneway proceeds from the elbow of what then was labelled Prince and Edward Street. And it went all the way through. That laneway was designed to benefit Gibraltar Road, which wasn't in existence at that point. The current format of that laneway is from the elbow of Prince and Edwards, it runs through to, it runs as a road inconsistent to the rest of the GIB, but it ceases to exist on the other side of the road. In 1971, there was a subdivision, I'm referring to DP 553160 on the next page. The subdivision went through, and in that subdivision you can see blue highlighted, I've highlighted it there, but it's easier to read on the other page in relation to how my property, which is lot 703, exists currently. So if you look at it there. On that page there, you'll notice the dotted lines on the bottom left corner. Those dotted lines are actually where my property absorbed what was known as now Morts Lane, and and in that absorption of Morts Lane, part of the condition of the subdivision was that Morts Lane, which has its own DP, which you can see if you turn the page, on the very last page, Morts Lane has its own DP, runs from the very top of my property through to Duke Street. Part of that original subdivision, it was a council requirement that they were to complete that laneway to make it accessible to benefit my property. We've got in writing there that Cedric Rouse, the original owner of the property, who was involved in the subdivision, was it requested that in the propaganda that council sent out in relation to my property, they actually labelled that DP as the entrance to Redlands. We have curtilage in keeping with the property that's planted along there, but I'm unable to use that laneway at the moment because the subdivision hasn't been completed by council. And so that's caused a great disadvantage to me. The way that my property is situated, I've got a 30-metre fall from the top to the bottom of the property. It's a Paul Sorensen garden, which has significance, and we bought the home appreciating Paul Sorensen's work and have worked with relatives of Paul Sorensen's and some of the original owners' relatives in Cedric Rouse's owners in trying to restore the property to its former glory and in sympathy in relation to what Paul was doing. It cost me 10% a year in maintenance to actually, because Paul was famous for his trees and his stone walls, it cost me 10% a year because I can't get to the rear of my home. So last year I spent $550,000 in maintenance on my home and in work on my home. The year before I spent more. The last 2 years it's cost me $120,000 because council hasn't completed that subdivision. I'm concerned that if I've had advice from a solicitor and we've met with a barrister that in making me historical, council has an obligation to keep up, to assist me in relation to the upkeep of the home, and I understand that's not a financial assistance, but I think at the minimum, completing of the subdivision that was originally done would certainly help me financially to keep the work of the home up and keep it up in relation to that. But it hasn't happened. I'm curious as the curtilage hasn't been listed as historical, the DP that council owns, and that's as significant as the garden. I don't really see a reason why council can't complete the subdivision. And if council aren't willing to complete the subdivision, the only reason I would see that would be a financial reason. I'm happy to purchase the subdivision at a reasonable price, and I think that it's fairly open what market rates are and how that would be calculated. I'm happy to purchase it and pay rates on it. But for me to keep the property and maintain the property in the way that it was and in the fashion, it would be imperative that I require that. Or council complete their end of the bargain, or at least work with me in relation to I'll purchase it and bring the curtilage back up to the way that the property is.
Thank you. I'll just check if there are any questions. Did you have any questions?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah.
So this issue around the non-completion of the subdivision,
Yeah.
Is that something that you have been in communication with the council about as a separate issue?
That letter that you've got there was sent off to council on the February the 20th. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so it is what it is. Council were given the land. I'm told that it was originally tried to be done, and that it was owned by Crown Land at that point in time, but the land, that DP has been transferred from Crown Land to Winchcarrabee Council in the last 5 years.
Okay, thank you.
I'm just a little confused. Are you objecting to the listing of the property as a heritage item?
No, I'd love it if it wasn't listed. Yeah, like I don't.
Are you objecting to it, though?
No, I am, yes. But I don't really think I'm going to have grounds to object to it. It's a great home.
Confused.
Sorry, and that's probably why I said that at the beginning. I don't really believe I've got grounds to object because it's a home that's probably in keeping with the vision of it. But I do believe that without council's assistance, they're not keeping their end of. If it does become heritage, you have to provide it. I understand there's a certain obligation council has to provide, and I understand that wouldn't be done if that was completed.
So you're seeking the construction of the laneway?
Correct. Or if you don't want to construct it, the sale of it to me.
Right. I'm just struggling to figure out how that's relevant to this heritage listing.
So I understand that if I'm heritage, council has to provide a certain amount of assistance in me keeping the upkeep of the home. Is that correct?
Well, there's certainly grants which are available that you can get to do that, but there's not an obligation. They don't necessarily have an obligation, no.
Yeah. my concern would be is that council's not assisting me in keeping it to the pristine, to the condition that it is in that laneway. And the subdivision hasn't been completed. When we can prove that the subdivision was, that laneway was there to benefit Redlands.
Thank you. I think we understand your position. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming along today.
Cheers.
The next speaker is Annabelle Wentworth. And this is in relation to item 225, 17 St Jude Street, Barrel.
Thank you, Chair, for the opportunity to address the panel. My name is Annabelle Wentworth and I'm the owner of 17 St Jude Street, Barrel. I provided an additional submission on Monday, which I assume the panel has received. Thank you. Firstly, just as an overarching comment, the proposed listing relates to the whole of my property. The recommendation does not address the fact that there are 2 houses on the property, nor does the recommendation give any particulars as to the exact characteristics of the property that the proposed heritage listing is seeking to protect. And if there are such characteristics, why these are not already adequately protected under the heritage conservation area. But putting that aside for now, the peer review supports listing on the basis of 2 heritage criteria: aesthetic significance, which was also the recommendation of the Community Heritage Study, and representative significance, which was not the recommendation of the Community Heritage Study, but rather a new criterion raised by the heritage consultant himself, which I'm now seeking to address. Firstly, aesthetic significance. The peer review states that the property has only a reasonable degree of aesthetic significance, but does not advance any reasons as to how or why. The Community Heritage Study said the property demonstrated aesthetic achievement because of its beauty, of its setting, and architectural form. However, being beautiful and or having attractive architectural form is insufficient, I would submit, to satisfy this criterion. To satisfy this criterion, the aesthetic characteristics must be clearly definable and distinct, and there is nothing outstanding or distinctive about this property, nor anything which explains the aesthetic importance of this property in a local context. And if there are some things of aesthetic importance, neither the study nor the peer review alludes to it. The property is not distinctive, it has no landmark qualities, it is not an example of any major work by an important designer or architect, and is of no more aesthetic significance than any other property in the Barrel of similar design. As such, I respectfully submit that the property does not meet the threshold for inclusion in the LEP as a heritage listed item based on this criterion. Secondly, representative significance. This is a new criterion raised only in the peer review. The peer review makes a number of statements to support its finding of representative significance, each of which I have addressed in more detail in my written submission. But just briefly, that the property is substantially intact. The property is not substantially intact. The property has had significant external and internal alterations and additions over the past 20 or so years, including to the original house, and also major structural modifications and additions. That the property is an example of a group of 4 speculative built houses. I respectfully submit that a speculative build does not in and of itself give the property heritage significance. Indeed, the speculative nature of the build is not substantiated, and no information has been offered as to why this might be different from other builds at the time or important from a local heritage perspective. That the property is a good representative example of an interwar bungalow design. The property cannot be found to have representative significance simply because it is representative of a particular type of design, as nearly every other house in Barrel can be defined as representative of one type of design or another. Certainly one of the houses on the property may be of interwar bungalow design, however it is no more representative of an interwar bungalow design than any other similarly designed house in Barrel. The property does not have the degree of distinctiveness needed to satisfy the criterion. Notably, the peer review does not provide any particulars as to why the property is considered to be a good representative example. For example, it demonstrates this or illustrates that, nor any particulars which have helped to assess the merits of the property against the criterion relative to its peers. That the property is representative of an interwar suburban expansion of the town of Barrel. Again, the property cannot be found to have representative significance simply because it is representative of a particular time or place, as nearly every other town in Bowral could be defined, for example, as representative of the suburban expansion of the town. Again, the peer review does not provide any particulars as to why the property's role in the expansion of Bowral is notable, nor why the property is considered more representative of Bowral's expansion at the time than any other property. That the property has a strong representative heritage value. I submit that the property does not have strong representative heritage values for the reasons I have outlined, being the property is not substantially intact and its integrity has over the years been compromised. The design of the property is not in any way distinctive. No particulars have been provided to demonstrate or illustrate why the property is considered to have strong representative heritage value as an interwar bungalow design, and the property is no more representative of this design than any other similarly designed house in Bowral. I again respectfully submit that the property, whilst it does include an attractive bungalow designed house, does not pass the inclusion threshold for LEP listing, heritage listing, under any of the assessed criteria, and as such there is insufficient justification to heritage list the property. There are also no heritage values proposed to be protected by this listing which are not otherwise adequately protected within the constraints of the local heritage conservation area. I request that the local planning panel does not endorse the peer review recommendation with respect to the property for the reasons I have outlined. If, however, the panel is minded to accept the findings, I request the recommendation be deferred to allow Council's heritage consultant to have regard to my submissions with respect to representative significance, which are not considered as part of his peer review as they were not included in the community study, and at the very least to come over, meet with me, inspect the property and determine exactly what parts of the property the listing seeks to cover. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll just check if there are any questions. Did you have any questions?
Thank you.
Thank you very much. The next speaker I have is Caroline Fagan. And this is in relation to item number 493, 7009 Illawarra Highway, Mossvale.
Dear team members, yesterday I was given 3 minutes to speak to you. And
you have 5 minutes.
5 minutes. I don't have that much my English. My name is Caroline Fagan and I'm the owner of 7009 Illawarra Highway, Mossvale. I have received your Heritage Study 2021 till 2023, dated the 31st of August 23 about my property. I have responded in writing on the 3rd of November 23, but I haven't received an answer from Council. Therefore, I jump right to your Heritage Study and have the following to say in addition to my letter I already wrote. 1. Your description of the statement of significance from the 2009 report is none. In an October 2020 site inspection, no information was found to justify a heritage listing. It is important to note that since then, no material change has occurred. It appears the historical occupation rather than the architectural merits are the reason for proposing a local heritage listing, and according to your report, it says that there is no social significance, no research potential, and no rarity. Regarding occupancy, your report relies on information from a real estate listing and the previous owner who gave you unfounded evidence for a supposed heritage listing of my property. Mr. Etienne de Mestre, the trainer of the first Melbourne Cup winners, never lived in my property, nor did his wife, who lived in Sutton Forest and Mossvale, where she died in a property called Garryowen, I think it's called, spelled Garryowen. So she did not live in my property and died elsewhere. I don't accept that the architectural merits of a small classical weatherboard cottage and the development of the main southern approach road to Muswell has any eccentric value to the building, which in itself has no other particular heritage value, neither in its architecture or its owners. Again, it is important to note that there has been no material change since 2009. Therefore, I respectfully request the council to reconsider the heritage listing of my property. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I'll just check. Are there any questions? Did you have any?
Yep, thank you.
Thank you very much. The next speaker is Clive West.
First of all, I'd like to thank the panel for allowing me to speak today. By omission, I hadn't registered, so I'm very grateful for the opportunity. My name is Clive West. I'm a resident of Berrima and have been since the year 2000, and I've been involved with heritage protection, not just in Berrima, but in the Shire. And first of all, I'd like to commend the authors and the people involved in this study and leading up to it, Dennis McManus, Bud Townsing, and Sarah Farnese. They put a huge amount of work into this, and I think it shows in the results. So thank you very much. My own house is heritage listed. It's a listed item, and we're in the Berrima Landscape Conservation Area. And my personal experience is that this has not affected our property value, probably the opposite. Heritage properties are fetching a big premium in Berrima, and we've recently submitted a DA, and we've made sure as far as we can that we're compliant with the special provisions that apply to Berrima, and that hasn't been onerous at all. So I'm a bit bewildered by these concerns that I've heard today about affecting the value of the house or unnecessary interference by council. That hasn't been our experience. I'll make it very short because it's been a long day for you, but I just wanted to support the endorsement of the peer review and the fact that it should go into public exhibition. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I'll just check. Are there any questions of this speaker? Thank you. Thank you for coming along today. Was that the last of the speakers, apart from the three that we haven't been able to?
Maybe a representative of 2 Pioneer Street here,
Is there somebody here on behalf of 2 Pioneer Street?
Yes.
Yes. Please come forward. Sorry. Oh, is it Mr. Baines?
Yes. I know. Yeah. You know, sorry. Yeah. My name is Colin Anelzark. I'm here to represent the owners of number 2 Pioneer Street.
Okay, and that's 2 Pioneer Street, Mittagong, item 434. Yes, please
That's
proceed.
Right. Yes.
So I think we have received some further written material. Yes.
That's right.
Thank you.
I'm here to object against the application of interim heritage order number 15 on number 2 Pioneer Street. It has been identified by council as being an example of a late Victorian era workers' cottage with a symmetrical frontage. This is really not quite true. In fact, the windows, or the only part of the building that's still original is the elevation to Pioneer Street. And in fact, the windows have never ever been symmetrical. They don't match. And the other thing is that, I'll just put my glasses on if I can. Sorry. On the 10th of July 2023, fire broke out at the vacant weatherboard cottage located in the corner of Pioneer Street and Albert Lane, Mittagong. Fire, smoke and water damage, followed by the removal of all the asbestos sheeting from the property, has left the dwelling now uninhabitable. The existing timber cottage at number 2 is not considered to be a good enough example of a late Victorian timber cottage to justify the cost of estimated repairs imposed on the property by the application of the interim heritage order. And it has been, and the building itself actually has been extended several times. And we believe that it's only, in fact, the first 4 front rooms, which is the item, I guess, that the council has the concern about. We believe that actually to bring that back to a residence in accordance with the requirements of the current building standards would be certainly cost prohibitive. And because of the damage to the property, it's now an eyesore. It's the only people living there now, in fact, are stray cats. And we do not support the application of the interim heritage order or the extension of the Mittagong conservation area onto the property. The property is not currently in the conservation area, and it's actually zoned as a commercial site, basically, at the moment.
Can I just check? So this property is 2 Pioneer Street, is proposed to be a heritage item.
Yes.
Under the community heritage study and the peer review.
Yes.
Are you saying it's also subject to an interim heritage order?
Yes, that's I think
Right.
is the reason why we're here. It's actually
Okay.
number 15.
No, the reason why we're here because we're not dealing with the interim heritage order, we're dealing with the proposal to put the community heritage study and the peer review on public
Okay, well,
exhibition
it's now
to
being
move it
listed on
forward
that.
to become a heritage item as recommended.
Yes.
Thank you. All right. Did anyone have any questions?
The photos that you submitted of the fire damage to the property, you said there was a fire on the 10th of July
Yes.
last year. So is the property still in that condition? There's been
Yes.
no work done
No.
to rectify that
No.
damage?
So it's been vacant for 18 months. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm just going to go back and see if the 2 speakers who weren't here before who were registered have come. I've got, maybe they could be asked outside. I've got Brett Williams and Lynn Gullifer. Sorry? Oh, we did. Oh, sorry. So Brett Williams is the only speaker who registered who hasn't arrived. And were there any more speakers, or is that the end of it? Thank you. Okay. Sorry, are you? Oh. So it's now 12:30. We've heard from all of the registered speakers. As I indicated before, we're going to consider the submissions, the further written material that's been provided to us, and we will announce what our advice is, and that will be webcast, but I don't know if that will be today or tomorrow. I'm just unable to say that at this stage. It's probably more likely to be tomorrow. Was there anything else? Okay, thank you everyone for coming along, and I would encourage anyone with the next stage of the process to engage with it and to make any further submission that you think is necessary, anything that you haven't been able to ventilate today. Thank you very much, and thank you to everybody involved, including in particular the council staff dealing with the last amount of flurry of information. Thank you. It's now 12:30, and I'll close the public meeting. Thank you.